Hello, everyone. I apologize for my get up tonight, but I was in. Today was kind of a fuck it day for me. I'm like, why do I even bother picking out an outfit when I'm not going anywhere? So I'm just wearing a bathrobe right now. That's what you get. But this video was supposed to be strictly just a reaction to the latest episode of Dark Side of the Ring. I will be covering that at the end, but something major happened today. The list of releases from WWE today, which felt like a Black Wednesday of sorts. And it was such a big news item, I felt like it was worth covering in one video. I also want to give brief thoughts on the Jon Moxley versus Jake Hager empty arena match that took place on tonight's AEW Dynamite. And I guess I'll start with that first since I just watched it. I had planned on making a video comparing this match to Gargano and Ciampa and Edge and Orton, because I did a video talking about those matches, what I did not like about those matches, and to see if Hager and Moxley fell into the same traps or if it did something better in some way. Honestly, I almost feel like I can't compare them because it really played out like a fairly normal match, only without an arena, only without a crowd in the arena. Only, I guess the lack of a crowd was more noticeable this time around because AEW up to this point had at least had like the wrestlers surrounding the area to react to stuff. So you get something. You get something resembling a reaction to everything. And this match didn't have that, so it just kind of felt like a normal, ordinary kind of no DQ match. You put this match in front of a crowd, it would probably work. As is, it was just kind of yet another empty arena match in this long string of shows that we're putting up with in the midst of a pandemic. And I hope to God we get back to having crowds in wrestling venues again, because good God, they are so important to the enjoyment of the show. So, was it better than Edge and Orton and Gargano Ciampa? Well, depends on what you look for. It didn't get as repetitive as Edge and Orton did, and it wasn't as long as the other two matches, which are 2 points in its favor, but again, it didn't take full advantage of the empty arena thing, because I thought with Moxley in there, it's like, oh, they're going to go all sorts of crazy. They're going to go all over the stands, and it's going to be a bloodbath, and it's going to be nuts. And I don't know, maybe because Moxley and AEW as a whole caught shit the last time Moxley went super violent, they decided not to do that. But in any case, it just kind of felt like a normal no DQ match, only without a crowd to react to stuff. So didn't really care for it personally. I want crowds back, and that's my thoughts on the match. That's pretty much it. So yeah, not my cup of tea. Please, dear God, can we get crowds back in pro wrestling? Can we get past this pandemic, please? CNN had an article up on its website saying that the social distancing will be encouraged until 2022. And I'm like, oh, fuck you. I was like, first of all, you're probably fear-mongering. Second of all, if that's actually true, I will probably just straight up go outside and break the rules anyway. It's like, fuck it. I'm not staying inside for 2.5 years. That's ridiculous. The only people I've had any kind of face-to-face contact with in the last, I don't know, over a month now have been the cashiers at the grocery store when I go to the grocery store. And that's while I'm wearing a mask and gloves. For the love of God, I need social interaction again. But anyway, let's move on to WWE. Let's talk about the news with WWE. And let me pull up the list of the releases, because this dropped like a bomb today, where it was like Black Wednesday, where just names were being dropped left and right of people who were being released. Let's see, where are you? Pull it up. Okay. All right. Okay. All right, I've got the list. And this is the most recent list as of 2 hours ago, so they may have added to it in the 2 hours since this was last updated, but we'll see. All right, list of releases, main roster and on-air talent. Drake Maverick, who let them use his wedding to film an angle, by the way. I just want to point that out. Kurt Hawkins gets released again, unfortunately. It's sad, because I've seen him in interviews. I like Kurt, and there's a personality there that just for whatever reason just hasn't been tapped into. I don't know what it is. Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows, those are kind of surprising, but those are guys I'm not worried about them getting work anywhere. It's like, dude, they'll either go to New Japan or they'll go to AEW, or they could get jobs anywhere. I think they'll be fine. Heath Slater, I guess the hopes of the three-man band all winning the WWE title has been nixed, at least for now. Eric Young, I didn't even realize Eric Young was still there. EC3, that's actually a blessing because EC3 is just way too talented to be doing nothing. But again, he's got nowhere to go right now while we're in the midst of a pandemic. But EC3, I mean, he could go back to Impact and be the biggest star there overnight. He could go to Ring of Honor. He could go just about anywhere in America, and he'd do just fine. Somebody suggested to me that he should go to AEW and form a tag team with MJF, and that could be like AEW's version of the Dynasty. And I'm like, ooh, that sounds really good. Leo Rush, wasn't he just the Cruiserweight champion? That's right, he dropped the belt. Yeah, I guess I'm not too surprised. I've heard, it was funny, Leo Rush is actually kind of a local guy. He's from DC. And a friend of mine knows some people that know him, and they told him that he's an asshole. So, take from that what you will. Eric Rowan, yeah, I guess the tarantula gimmick didn't work out for him. Sarah Logan, oh, that disappoints me. She's cute. Referee Mike Chioda, that one's legitimately shocking because he's been there forever. Like forever. Like, I don't remember, Chioda's probably been there since I started watching, and probably before. Primo and Epico, those are two guys that you forget that they're still there. They've been there forever, though. They've been around a long time. Mike and Maria Kanellis, I think Mike was requesting his release, so this isn't a shock. Zack Ryder, I bet that $40,000 purchase on action figures doesn't look too smart right now. No Way Jose, never did anything in the main roster. Rusev, that poor son of a bitch who kept getting over, and they kept pulling the rug out from under him. And Rusev, it's like, he's right there. Like, he's the guy right there, got over, and they don't want to use him for whatever reason. I believe I heard that Lana was released too. She's not on this list, though. Because that would be weird if they released Rusev and not Lana. That would be really, really weird. NXT, they let go Deonna Purrazzo. I've seen her a couple of times. Alexander Jaksic, MJ Jenkins, and Ace Steel, who's a coach. Nobody that I'm overly familiar. Deonna is the only one I think I've seen, to be perfectly honest. But yeah, it's not fun to get that news when you're getting a developmental deal and find out that you're not going to be there anymore. Producers and employees, some have been furloughed. This list includes Kurt Angle, Aiden English, Lance Storm, Shane Helms, Sarah Stock, Scott Armstrong, Billy Kidman, Dave Fit Finley, Pat Buck, Sean Daivari, Mike Rotunda, Andrea Listenberger, who's a writer, and Jerry Soto, who's a Spanish language announcer. So yeah, it's a lot of people. A lot of people got let go, and I think it's because, you're not getting the live revenue from these events that you're running, and cuts have got to be made. And I think it's one of those unfortunate side effects of everything that's going on right now. And unfortunately, those people don't have anywhere to go because all the other companies are basically shut down at this point, not hiring because they're not really. I mean, what do you do? It's a horrible, horrible situation. This is some bad press for the WWE at a time where they really didn't need bad press, considering they're already catching criticism for being labeled by the governor of Florida as a essential business, to which I scoffed at that, and I'm a wrestling fan and I scoffed at that. Because if that's an essential business, then all my other fucking hobbies should be essential businesses. Where I want a Godzilla movie right fucking now. Where's my Godzilla vs. Kong? That should be open in a movie theater immediately, so I can go see it. I mean, that's the level of they're not an essential business, is basically my point. And so they caught some shit for that. Then the Dark Side of the Ring episode aired last night, which did not paint them in the best light. And now all this happens. It's like, man, WWE is looking like a shit stain right now. But anyway, it's unfortunate. But it's also a case of they got to make budget cuts, and if they insist on running live shows, this is what's going to happen. Because when you're not getting in all that live revenue and less people are watching the show, you can't afford to keep people around. It's an unfortunate thing, but it's the truth. And it also doesn't help that, with these smaller venues or with these smaller shows filmed in the performance center, they probably don't cost as much to produce either, so that's less money to less money to go towards production and to create jobs that people need to fill. Do you really need 20 agents there when you can probably do the entire show with just two? I don't know. Like, it's, again, I've never put together a wrestling show. I'm just pulling ideas out of thin air. It's just another example of a very hard situation that we are all going through right now, and it's a mess and it's horrible and we all hate it. And I just hope to God that everything gets back to normal as soon as possible, because yeah, it's like, and I'm one of the lucky ones, because I still have a job and I'm still getting paid, and I can work from home, thank God. So at least I have that, and a lot of these guys, unfortunately, don't even have that. So hopefully things can get back to normal fairly soon, and those guys can get jobs. If not back with WWE, then with hopefully somewhere else. And some of those guys I think would shine in other areas. Like, I'm looking around. Again, EC3 absolutely should go somewhere else. Anderson and Gallows, not worried about them at all. They'll land on their feet. They'll wind up somewhere and do great. Mike and Maria Kanellis, they did very well in Impact. I could see them going back there, and they were kind of squandered in WWE, I think. I made it clear I wasn't a huge fan of the gimmick that they were given. But we'll see. It'll be very interesting to see how all this turns out. But again, my best wishes go out to all the guys that got released today, guys and gals. It's not fun. It's horrible. It sucks, and it's just more bad news piled on of all of this awfulness that we're all going through right now, and it's terrible. And I feel really, really bad for everybody that's on this list, and for probably more people that are going to wind up on this list. So we'll see how the next few days go, because I don't expect this to be the end of it either, to be perfectly honest. So, with that, let's talk about Dark Side of the Ring. The latest episode aired last night, and it was the one centered around the Jimmy Snuka situation, namely the, how do I want to phrase this? The death of Nancy Argentino, who was his girlfriend. And this has been a story that I'd heard floated around a little bit. Like, when I first got on the internet, I'd heard rumblings about, like, Jimmy Snuka killed a girl or whatever. And but I never got the full story on it. And that was one thing I was hoping this would do. I was hoping it would provide, like, a full timeline on everything that happened and as many details as possible. Because Dark Side of the Ring has been great at doing that. One of the best examples, probably the best example, was the New Jack episode where, with the mass transit incident, we'd always heard the story that, quote, a midget wrestler vouched for Eric Kulas, mass transit, and that's how he ended up in the match. Well, I'm like, well, who? Like, who was the midget wrestler? And Tiny the Terrible, and they interviewed him as part of the thing, which I thought was a great little touch to add a little extra flavor to it, and to finally get that side of the story of what actually happened. So all of that was great, and I was hoping for something similar with this, where this was a wrestling story that I didn't know a whole lot about. Details were very vague. It boiled back up, as they mentioned in the documentary, after the release of Snuka's book, and details that he provided about her death clashed with what he said way back then, and he was officially charged with murder and that whole stuff. But then Snuka died, and so the story soon fizzled out. And again, once something like finally bubbles to the surface, you see things and you read things, and it's almost too much information to process. And I still didn't have an idea of what exactly happened, what all the details were. All I know is that Jimmy Snuka had been accused of killing this girl, whoever she was. And again, I'd heard rumblings of this years ago. I'd heard so many different versions of this. Like, all of it conflicts with what you heard in Dark Side of the Ring, and none of it quite adds up. I'd heard one version of the story where she was a prostitute that Jimmy had for the night, and he got a little rough with her, and she died. I heard another version where she was a one-night stand. She was one of his road girlfriends, because when you're traveling, you have a girl in each town that you go see, and she like did drugs and died in the middle of the night. I had heard so many other versions of the story, and none of it added up. I never even got a name. I didn't know her name was Nancy Argentino until a few years ago when the story started to resurface. So that was something I was hoping to see in this episode. Like, give us like a full timeline of everything that happened, and give us full context of everything that happened, so that it all makes at least some kind of sense. And I felt like this did that. I felt like this accomplished that. I made the comment on Twitter that this episode, you look at some of the other episodes that Dark Side of the Ring has done, and New Jack, that episode felt like a profile on a wild psychopath. The Brawl for All episode felt like an ESPN 30 for 30. Like, oh, look at this crazy event that took place back in 1998, and given the full details of that event. And the Benoit two-parter kind of felt like a true crime documentary that you'd see on Netflix or something. This felt like an episode of Cold Case Files or Unsolved Mysteries, which I have more of a connection to because I grew up watching it as a kid. And it's such a great story that I wonder. I wonder why Unsolved Mysteries didn't cover it, because I can almost picture this thing being covered by Unsolved Mysteries with Robert Stack narrating the whole thing, and they've done. They've done like celebrity stories before. I remember they did the one of Who Killed Superman, the actor who played Superman way back in the 50s. I forget his name, but it was they did a whole segment on that one. So I think a story like this would have been perfect for Unsolved Mysteries, but I don't know if they would have had to get cooperation from the WWE or what. And that's another interesting thing about Dark Side of the Ring. They use a lot of WWE footage, which I find very interesting. There's no interviews from any WWE personnel in any of these things, but they've gotten away with using a lot of footage from the WWE, which I find very interesting. So it makes you wonder how much cooperation they're getting from Stanford in producing these things. But and this one's really funny because they really didn't make the WWE look good at all. But in any case, going back to the sketchy details of the story, I remember Hacksaw Jim Duggan saying in a shoot interview once, because everybody brings up, yes, I got caught in a car with Iron Sheik and we had pot, and I lost my job over it initially, and people still bring it up to me to this day. And it's like, and Hacksaw just kind of threw his hands up in the air. He's like, Jimmy Snuka killed a girl, and nobody brings that up. And I get caught with pot with a guy I was feuding with, and that's like the end of the world. It's funny the things that stick. And I always thought that was a funny line from Hacksaw. But again, it kind of like put that little nugget in my head. It's like, well, what exactly happened with Snuka and the girl? Because I never got full details on it. And I guess I should talk about my experiences with Jimmy Snuka and what I felt about him as a fan. Snuka's best years were before my time. The feud with Morocco, the dive off the cage, the feud with Piper, the coconut incident. All of that happened before I was even born. So Snuka's best years were really before my time, and that was something that I watched through videotapes and Coliseum video releases, and just got an idea of what Jimmy Snuka was all about. When I first saw him, 89, 90, 91, he was basically a glorified jobber at that point. Like, he was still popular, and he was still presented as like a baby face, but he wasn't a big star. And, you put him in the ring with someone like a Ted DiBiase or Kurt Hennig or even The Undertaker. He wrestled The Undertaker in his first, in The Undertaker's first WrestleMania match. He had matches with Rick Rude, and he lost just about all of them. So he was basically just a flashy babyface that was there to lose to the heels that mattered. That was the role that Jimmy Snuka was playing by the time I started watching him. But when you go back and watch that earlier stuff, it's legitimately great, intense stuff. Like, I love his stuff with Piper. I love his stuff with Morocco. And there's a legit, megastar there waiting to happen. But I always knew there was kind of a dark side to Jimmy Snuka as well, because I'd heard stories. Actually, when I was at a book signing, this was almost a decade ago, Countdown to Lockdown, Mick Foley's latest book, he was doing a signing near me, and I went to go meet Mick Foley, and he was taking questions before the signing, before he started signing autographs. And he told a story about Jimmy Snuka, which I've heard him tell in other interviews. So if you've heard this before, there is a good chance you've heard this before, but I'm going to tell the story anyway. So he says it was the first time he met Jimmy Snuka, and he goes backstage, and he's a worker at this point, and he'd idolized Jimmy Snuka because of the dive off the cage at Madison Square Garden. And he goes back there, and one of the bookers is talking to the promoter, or one of the wrestlers is talking to the promoter, or something like that is going on, and they're saying, dude, I don't think Jimmy can go tonight. What do you mean? Well, he's fucked up. He's been snorting cocaine. He's fucked up. And Snuka overhears this, comes right over to them, and says, you think the Superfly is fucked up? He proceeds to go into a bathroom stall, and you can hear him like fumbling around with something in his hands, and then you hear, then he storms out of the stall and goes, now the Superfly is fucked up. Great story, and Foley told it so much better than I just did, but it's really paints the picture of like the type of lifestyle that Jimmy Snuka led, and I think it's indicative of the type of lifestyle that a lot of wrestlers were living at the time, because I don't think a lot of people understand what being a wrestler was all about, especially at that time. It's often been called the rock star lifestyle, but it's a little bit more than that, because yes, there is that rock star element where all the vices and all the partying, it's all there. And, music has obviously always been riddled with that type of stuff, and it's true of pro wrestling as well, with the added component of athletics. So they have to deal with all the issues that athletes do as well, with whether it be injuries, whether it be, having to find time to work out, making sure that they're able to perform when it's time to perform, and all the other temptations that go along with being on the road. So wrestling, you want to know why the mortality rate at wrestling is so bad? It's like, dude, it's the worst aspect, the lifestyle alone. It's the worst aspects and temptations of both rock stars and athletes, and it's combined together. So yeah, of course, you're gonna have a bunch of people that fall off the wagon and make all the wrong decisions. And it sounds like Jimmy Snuka, based on what you're hearing in this documentary, is one of those guys. And a lot of the stories that were told about Jimmy in the documentary did not shock me. Did not shock me at all. It's like, yep, his partying, yep, I can fully believe that. Especially, I have a friend who met Snuka at a signing about 15 years ago, I think, and he told me, it's like, dude, he doesn't know up from down anymore. Like, he's just out of it. And so I'm sure brain damage, as his wife mentioned on the episode, brain damage has a lot to do with it. I'm sure drugs has a lot to do with it. It's one of the sadder side effects of pro wrestling, especially from back then. I think nowadays the guys and gals are a lot smarter, but it's that was not the case back then. And so basically they outline everything that happened from the relationship with Nancy Argentino, which that was the most interesting part to me, because it was like, okay, so she wasn't just some one night stand, she wasn't just a hooker, which is how I first heard the story. She wasn't any of those things at all. She was actually his girlfriend, and she was actually like his handler that was like driving him around from show to show to make sure he got there on time, because he sounded like a guy that was like completely incapable of being an adult, when you consider like he was practically homeless before he got into wrestling. He couldn't read or write English, and it's like, oh my god, this guy is like, he couldn't function without somebody to like drive him from place to place. And then you throw the drugs on top of that, it's like, oh my god, this guy's a mess. And so it was nice to get like interviews from her family and a full context of who she was as a person, and to get a name and a face attached to the story and to everything that happened. And unfortunately, her relationship with Jimmy Snuka sounds like so many abusive relationships that I have seen and experienced in my lifetime, and you see it in everybody has seen this. Like this, the story, if you haven't watched the episode yet, go and watch it. I guarantee you've heard this story with the controlling, crazed boyfriend that just won't let her go. Like, won't let her go. He's absolutely terrible for her. He's awful, and it's a toxic lifestyle, but she can't leave and he won't let her go. And it's just, it almost never ends well when you have a situation like that. And I've seen it in my life. I know most people, if not everybody, has seen at least one case of it, whether it's a friend or a family member or something like that. It's an unfortunate thing that just it will be here until the end of time. There's always people that make the wrong decisions and say, they can't help who they fall in love with, and that's something that it's a mistake that unfortunately keeps getting made, and it sounds like it was one of those relationships where anybody with a brain and eyes could see that this was not going to work out well for her, and that Jimmy was not a good match for her, but she just couldn't leave, and is what it's and he wouldn't let her leave by the sound of it. Um, as per usual, relationships like that end in tragedy. This one did. She died under very mysterious circumstances. She had died in the it sounded like she had basically died in the hotel room, or she was like barely alive when Jimmy came back from the show. But basically, he woke up one morning, went to go work his matches, came back. She was knocking on death's door, and she pretty much died not long after that. And the injuries sustained led to her death, and the debate comes in how and when she sustained those injuries, and that's always been the debate. Jimmy Snuka's story was that she slipped and fell, hit the pavement, and went to sleep that night, woke up, and just didn't feel right, and that's how that happens. That sounds fishy to me. Not gonna lie, that sounds super super fishy. And what sounds even fishier than that is that as part of the interview process, the Dark Side of the Ring, they interviewed I believe it was the chief of police in the town, Allentown, where the death took place. And he was dodgy as all hell, trying to like dodge questions, and especially when they get to the point, and this is where WWE looks really bad. So WWE has a meeting with Jimmy Snuka and the investigators. Closed door meeting. Police report provides no summary or no transcript of that meeting, and the investigation gets dropped. It's like, okay, that sounds like somebody was bought off. And again, the chief of police, I believe it was the chief of police, was very dodgy with his answers to the questions, and it was like, okay, yeah, this is shady as hell. This is really bad. And at the time, and again, this is another part of the story I didn't know. This happened when Snuka was at the absolute height of his career and popularity. I thought this had happened in like 88, 89, and like, oh no, 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 no. This happened when he was like the top star of the promotion at that point, and the feud with Morocco was going on. And they interviewed Don Morocco, and he said, yes, selfishly, I was kind of worried that Snuka was going to go to jail, because it would have fucked me over, because he's the golden goose, and he's like the best run I'm ever going to have. And that's, how much money did those investigators get to drop it? I don't know. I don't know. It sounds fishy as hell. Now, granted, it's a documentary that goes an hour, and they want to present the story how they want to present it, but like I said, the guy answering the questions didn't come off well at all, and the whole situation sounds super, super fishy to me, and, I smell a rat, basically, is what I say to that. And Jimmy's story doesn't add up. Tonga Kid, who was interviewed as part of it, who was defending Jimmy the entire time, said he had never heard Jimmy's alibi for what happened with her slipping and falling on the pavement the night before. So it's like, even he who was defending Jimmy didn't even mention, it's like, yeah, he never mentioned that to me. So I was like, oh shit. And unfortunately, the documentary gets up to the point where Jimmy's book comes out, and then the story starts to come to life once journalists start to dig into it a little bit, and additional things come out, like the autopsy report that says, point blank, this should be investigated as a homicide. Her injuries are consistent with that type of death, basically, and it's again, what the hell happened with the investigation? How could you ignore something like that? I don't know. And Jimmy, given his mental state at that point, was deemed unfit to stand trial, and that was pretty much the end of the story. He died not long after that, and we never got like any kind of a real conclusion to it. So a lot of the questions are left unanswered. Jimmy didn't get his day in trial, and we never really found out for sure what happened to Nancy Argentino. I can only speculate, and based on what I've said so far, you probably know where I lean on this. As I said during the Benoit thing, I'm a very justice-minded individual, and this story reeks of bullshit in so many ways, and I'm like, I personal opinion based on everything that we have and all the information that we got from the documentary and all the information that's available and nothing else. This is just my personal belief. I think the Superfly got fucked up the night before. I think he got rough with her, injured her, and I think it's an accidental death. I think he went to the show that day not realizing that he had dealt life-ending injuries to her. It's my personal opinion. Take that for what it's worth. I'd like to believe he wouldn't be so callous as to beat the shit out of her and go to a show and then come back and then decide to like call an ambulance. I think Jimmy was living it up and lit up and got a little too rough and shit went bad and shit went south in a hurry. I think that's what happened. And there were some strange stories in there. The funeral in particular, where Jimmy went up and cried at the casket while wearing a tank top and shorts and flip flops. And I'm like, that's weird. That's really weird. But by what it sounds like, Jimmy Snuka was a weird dude. So it is what it is what I'll say. But yeah, I thought the episode was very interesting. Unfortunately, because we didn't get an ending, the episode doesn't end on any kind of a hopeful note. It doesn't end on any kind of a... Like, the Benoit episode, as horrible as that entire situation was, at least it ended with Nancy's sister and Chris's other son kind of reconnecting and forming some kind of a bond relationship in the midst of all this tragedy. So you get that kind of hopeful end to everything. And the Brawl for All, at least... we got to see like where all the wrestlers are now and how the Brawl for All impacted them and how it didn't impact them and how they all wound up and how they're all doing today. For better or worse. Draws, not so great. Godfather seems to be doing pretty well. It's one of those things. But this one, it just kind of stops because there is no ending, and that's the unfortunate part of the entire thing. So that's why I said it kind of really does feel like a cold case file or an episode of Unsolved Mysteries, where you do get a lot of those where, you just... whenever I go back and watch old episodes of Unsolved Mysteries, which I do fairly often because it's on... I have Pluto TV, which is great if you love like a bunch of random things. So basically Pluto TV is... I know I'm not sponsored by them at all. I'm just describing my viewing habits. It's a free app that you have. I have it on my Roku, and it has like free 24/7 streaming channels that you can watch. And they have a Mystery Science Theater channel, which I love. They have an Unsolved Mysteries channel, which I love. They have an Impact Wrestling channel, so you can watch like old episodes of TNA and Impact and everything. And there's a bunch of stuff on there, and I think it's very interesting. I don't know if a lot of people know about it, but it's I don't know. I personally don't know anybody else that uses it, but if you like some of the things that are on there, it's worth a watch, because sometimes I just want to watch an episode of Unsolved Mysteries. But when I watch an episode of Unsolved Mysteries now, they keep updating these stories whenever they rerun them. So whenever I watch one of these stories, I hope it's like, okay, there's an update. There's an update. And when it fades to black, my heart just sinks that we never got an answer to that case. And then on the flip side, when you get that green screen pop up and they give you the text with the update on it, and I'm like, yes, thank you. Okay, case solved. And I'm filled with hope again. But when they fade to black, man, it just crushes me. And Cold Case Files is about solving the cold case. Unsolved Mysteries is probably the more apt description here, because it's like an episode of Unsolved Mysteries where it fades to black and you don't get an update. It's like, fuck. And that's kind of what this felt like. The ending felt kind of empty. And that's by design. That's how the story really played out. So, very unfortunate. Another great episode of Dark Side of the Ring. And I was really looking forward to this one because... again, I had heard rumblings about this story for years, decades even, but I never got a full timeline on everything that happened with all the details in the proper context. And I think the best thing to come out of this is that finally, like, people know Nancy Argentino's name and know what was lost in that whole incident. So at the very least, there's that element to it. She's not just another statistic. She's not just another face. She's not a prostitute or a one-night stand that went wrong. There's a lot more to her story, and unfortunately, her story did not have a happy ending. But yeah, another great episode of Dark Side of the Ring. The next episode they're going to be doing is one that I find very interesting, and that is the the murder of D'Lo, or I almost said D'Lo Brown, of Dino Bravo, not D'Lo Brown. See, he's on my brain because he was on 2 of these episodes. But yeah, the murder of Dino Bravo, which is another one of those weird, like Gino Hernandez, his mysterious death, and things like that, where it's like, what the fuck happened here? It's just such a weird. You wouldn't expect Dino Bravo, of all people, who didn't seem like a crazed lunatic or anything, to be wrapped up in the mafia and get, killed in a mob hit of all things. So, he just didn't look the type, and as a wrestler, he wasn't the flashiest personality, so he was very unassuming. And then you hear how he died, and I'm like, what the fuck is that? So to get, like, a little documentary on that, I think that's going to be very interesting to watch. And again, it's going to be another one of those, like, unsolved mysteries, cold case files type deals where we just kind of explore this crazy thing that took place, and we'll go from there. But yeah, I will be here next week with another Dark Side of the Ring, but I want to get another video to you guys sometime this weekend. I might do a live stream of some kind. I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I'm scared to do like another watch along because YouTube shut down my last one, but we'll see. I'll come up with something. But in any case, that is all I have for you now. Thanks again, everybody, for watching. You can follow me on Twitter. The link is in the description, and be sure to like, subscribe, hit the little bell icon so you get notified when I post new videos, and I will enjoy giving those videos to you. But until next time, later, everybody.